It boils down to that. Lindsay, right there. Let's get value add. Bring in Tobias Harris, founder and principal at Japan Foresight. He joins us now live all the way across in D.C., where we're holding up his dinner probably. Tobias, great to see you and appreciate your time. And also a pleasure having you on the show. So listen, we were kind of only half joking a couple of seconds ago offline, and I was saying that, you know, Japan has a pretty obvious betting culture, even though technically and legally it's really hard to gamble in Japan. Do you have any sort of sense, right, whether it's, you know, side bets or even underground, what the bookmakers in Japan say about whether it's going to be Koizumi or Takaichi?
I'm not gonna guess what the bookmakers are thinking at this point, but I think when you look at the signs that we do have, certainly I think heading into this 2-week race, Koizumi is probably the front runner, even more than Takaichi, and I think there's a few reasons for that. One, when you look at opinion polls, not of the overall opinion polls, where Takaichi has had a slight lead with the public as a whole. Koizumi, when you look at LDP supporters, he actually, in a number of polls, actually has a double-digit lead over Takaichi. So that's something, if he can reverse some of his underperformance in that category last year, that's going to make a big difference. The other thing, we know that he's got a lot of strength among lawmakers. We see that he brought in Kato Katsunobu, the finance minister, who actually has a lot of right-wing connections. That's a big endorsement for him. Kato ran last year, but Kato threw his weight behind Koizumi early on. He's running his campaign, and that really tells you that Koizumi is trying to moderate his image and really wants to bring all parts of the party together to support his candidacy. And that really, I think, gives him an edge heading into this race over Takaichi.
So he's managed to, I guess, bring in the right wing of the LDP, but I mean, what about Takeshi Sanai, though? I mean, a lot of people look at her and go, "This is she's the second coming of Shinzo Abe."
So it's not even that Koizumi has to bring in the right wing; he just has to pull off enough votes from the right wing that basically he cuts into Takaichi's support. I mean, Takaichi, I think she enters this race. There's a few obstacles I think that she has to repeating her performance last year, where she lost by a very slight margin in the second round against Ishiba after winning in the first round. First of all, a number of her supporters from last year's election lost in the lower house election last year and in the upper house election last year. And in fact, I think her part of the party, the right wing of the party, was disproportionately affected by those electoral defeats. So that already puts her, I think, in a bit of a hole relative to where she was last year. Another factor in her performance last year was that she got Aso Taro to support her. You know, at the last minute, he threw his faction behind her. That, I think, really pumped her numbers up. There's no guarantee that she's going to get Aso's support this year. Aso, I think, has been much more cagey about where he's going to go. You know, last year, a lot of it was that he just did not want Ishiba to win and was determined to prevent that. This year, I think he just wants to win. He wants to see the party come together. That does not necessarily mean that he's going to back Takaichi. The third thing, Kobayashi is running again. He's this, young conservative. He's got a lot of young conservatives around him who want generational change just within the conservative part of the party. They see Takaichi, she was close to Abe. She's been around for a long time. They think it's also time for a change. So he's going to divide that conservative vote a little more. And the final thing is that, yes, she's polling well, but it's hard to see how much better she can poll than she did last year. And I don't think she's going to pull in enough party supporter votes to make up for what she seems to have lost among the lawmaker votes. So all of that suggests that it's going to be really hard for her to replicate the performance she had last year.
Tobias, Lynn here, great to see you again. As you were just saying, in terms of Koizumi being perhaps that de facto frontrunner in this particular race last year, so exactly 12 months ago, basically, we were also talking about Koizumi being a favourite as well. But as the campaign went on, there were question marks raised. Indeed, his own father said that he didn't believe that Koizumi was ready to become the Prime Minister. This was just 12 months ago, and I note, of course, that he is taking on the Farm Minister role, dealing with the rice crisis. But in your mind, is he ready to be the Prime Minister of the fourth largest economy at a very complex time?
I mean, I think it's absolutely a huge job. I mean, and I think this is the thing the LDP in general is struggling with, that they need the next leader to do a lot of different things. And it's really hard to find one candidate in this field, or really in the party as a whole, who can do all of those things, because they've got to get out of this political hole that they've dug for themselves. They've got to find a way to stabilize their control of the diet so the government really can get things done. And frankly, you've got to navigate a pretty complicated global situation, complicated relationship with the United States, challenges from China, maintaining relations with with South Korea. I mean, there's a lot going on right now, and finding someone who can do all of those things and also maybe get the public excited is, I think, really difficult. I think, frankly, though, it does feel like the LDP is going to prioritize fixing its own situation, getting its own house in order as a way to stabilize everything else. That if the LDP feels confident, feels like it has control of the government, then it can really start feeling energetic. You can really start getting the kind of dynamic leadership that the LDP has been looking for, I think, for a few years now, and then hope that you can find a way to win the next election to get a stable majority. And so I suspect that's what they're prioritizing now. As far as Koizumi himself, clearly he has performed fairly well in the agricultural minister role. I think, as he acknowledged in his press conference the other day, that he learned some lessons in terms of how to approach just appealing to voters, how to communicate with the LDP's voters, how to communicate with the public. Clearly, I think we saw in his messaging, he's trimmed maybe some of the bolder edges that maybe might have alienated some LDP lawmakers. He really seems to be wanting to use his brand, his image, to pull the party together, to get the party focused on listening to the public. I mean, that was really the thing that he kept driving home over and over again in his press conference Saturday. We need to listen to the public. We need to get back to what worked for us in the past. He really harkened back to the time when the LDP was last in opposition, and they were really focused on delivering for voters. And so to that extent, I think he gets the problem. I think he gets the challenges the party faces. It's just a question, will he be able to execute if he wins?
And in terms of his main competitor here, Takeichi, you were noting some of the elements of her campaign. It did seem like in the press conference she was somewhat softening her image, although still courting the conservative vote here. Do you get the sense that the market has read her correctly? Because we've seen the moves in terms of the yen and the JGBs when it was announced that there would be an election with the possibility that she could become the next leader. Will she be still, in your mind, a fiscal dove? I mean, will she potentially put indirect pressure on the Bank of Japan?
I mean, it's a great question. I mean, I think you're absolutely right that in her press conference the other day, she definitely tried to present a softer, more moderate image than she did last year, where I think she really leaned into being a serious, committed fiscal dove, and that deficits aren't that big of a deal, and the Bank of Japan has to keep rates lower for longer. Clearly, she's trying to project a different image. I think it probably also maybe shows on her part that she's aware of the market interpretation of her views, and that she has to be a little more sensitive to that at a time when interest rates are rising. So that is maybe an encouraging sign that she's able to be a bit more of a realist, that she's willing and able to tone back some of her more committed ideological positions. So that's maybe not a bad sign. I don't actually know how much it tells us, though, about how she'll actually govern, because the reality is that you have whoever becomes the next prime minister, there's going to be a lot of work to do. Just, they're going to have to deal with the opposition, right? And so what sort of deals are they going to end up making to get a budget through the Diet, to get a supplemental budget through the Diet? Are they going to try to bring a coalition partner in? What sort of price tag is going to come on that, on those coalition negotiations? So in some ways, it really almost doesn't matter as much the kind of campaign proposals they're running on, if ultimately what matters is they have to sit down across the table from Isshin no Kai or the Democratic Party for the People and try to make some sort of deal. That really is where the fiscal policy kind of outline is going to come from making those deals. And so, yes, I think she's very dovish still. I don't think we should get our hopes up too much that she's going to pivot in the direction of fiscal consolidation, but she's at least trying, and I think that's a meaningful signal.
Yeah, like anywhere in the world, right? A leopard changing its spots, it's sort of like a prerequisite for being a politician, even in Japan. So here's a question for you, Tobias. We may see things, her harder positions, more toned down, et cetera, but for the Trump administration, the folks at 1600 Pennsylvania, they will obviously remember her. She's been around for a while, and they will know her relations with Abe as well, whom the president absolutely loved, if we're given to understand correctly. Would it be fair to say that she would be the kind of prime minister that would sit better with the Trump administration than somebody younger and also relatively more unknown, like Koizumi?
I think there's certainly an argument to make